Hello, everybody. My name is Shango, and welcome to the African Chronicles, the book of the day, number 4. I will give you a moment to install, to sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'll give you a few seconds, so take time. Go ahead, install yourself. Let me put some music out there. So, welcome, people. I hope you're doing fine. I hope you're doing okay. Today's topic is the miseducation of the Negro. We're going about we're going to talk about this book from Carter Godwin Woodson, The Miseducation of the Negro in the United States. And also, the second part of this show, we're going to talk about the similarities or the differences regarding the education of Black children outside the United States. So don't hesitate to share your personal experience, what you're living, what you see with our guest, and we are going to share everything with us. All right? So please, guys, don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe if you didn't do it already. And we are going to start in a few seconds. So I will give you a moment in case you're late. So don't forget again to subscribe, to like, to share. This is important. This is a very interesting topic. We're going to talk about education of our Black children. And we have a guest in the building. We are going to talk about this book. Let me show you again. And I advise you to read it. The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter Godwin Woodson. Very, very good. So I give you a moment. Please, guys, come on in. Don't be afraid. Don't be shy. And let's have a conversation about this. And of course, if you want to buy this book, you will find the links in the description box below. You are welcome in the African Chronicle Live, the book of the day. And today's topic is the miseducation of the Negro. Oh, I can see already some comments. I already started this book since Monday. Very good, Sophie. Very good. Sanjaka, hello. Welcome, Sanjaka. Please bring your friends, share these links, share this video, and let them know we are about to start right now. So without further ado, we're going to start the show in a few seconds and right after this. Please welcome Dr. Evandra Catherine for this show. Hello, Evandra.
Good morning. Hello. Well, I guess it's probably afternoon and maybe even evening in some parts of the diaspora, but where I am, to my African and Caribbean sisters and brothers, it's the morning still.
All right. So good morning to you and welcome to the African Chronicles, the book of the day live. How are you today?
I'm doing fabulous this morning.
All right. Thank you very much for being here. So let's jump right into it. So can you, before we start and talk about this book, for those who don't know you, can you please introduce yourself?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat yourself?
I'm sorry. I was saying, for those who don't know you, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, definitely. So my name's Dr. Evandra Catherine. I have doctor in front of my name. I have a PhD in education policy. But the work that I do for the diaspora is to take the knowledge that we keep and hold in the academy and away from us as Africans and Caribbeans, and to share that knowledge back out, and to do it from a scholarly perspective, and to be able to critically look at the works that are before us, and ensure that we have the right knowledge and information. So that's ultimately my main goal and effort. I could tell you much more about myself, but it wouldn't help you understand why we need this knowledge. The conditions that we in should help you understand that. So.
Okay, so that was exactly my second question. Can you tell me, I have an idea, but for those who don't know you, what brought you to this journey, if I might say so? What
Yeah.
was the trigger? Why doing this and not something else?
Excellent question. So, like many of us African folk, we've experienced a lot of hardship, and much of those hardships were in our earliest years of life. And so I'm no different. I'm that same person. Ultimately, in 2005, so I was about maybe 22 or 23 around that time, I decided to get my undergraduate degree in African American Studies. My ultimate goal was to be a civil rights lawyer or to be a politician. But what I did know was I didn't know myself. I didn't know who I was. And then I also felt like I would be at a disadvantage trying to advocate for people who look like me without even knowing what our history was. And as you know, in America, the K-12 system does not teach you true African history or any at all. And so when I got knowledge of myself, knowledge of my ancestors, knowledge of the continent, I felt like the only way that we could actually redeem and liberate ourselves, and we talk about liberation a lot, but more sovereignty, is for us to look back east, as Marcus Garvey and many others have suggested, and to redeem our continent. And then after that's done, then we know that the rest of us Africans across the diaspora would be taken care of. And so I would really sum this up to say knowledge of self is what brought me here, and wanting to get in my spirituality, getting closer to the ancestors and understand past, present, and future is all the same for us. And that if we as African people could get a better sense of who we were while living in this all white space, that we would be much better off here, even though the goal is for us to be much better off globally.
So again, I'm not naive, but I'm asking you the question anyway, just for the sake of the conversation. But aren't you in the United States, the most powerful country in the world, and they talk about the pursuit of happiness and all that? So how come you don't even know yourself? How?
Because I am colonized by the same very people that the continent was colonized by. The colonizer is the same. It doesn't matter. If I was on the continent, I probably wouldn't have a real true sense of self. But what I do know is, while not maybe having that sense of self, I know that the nature and that the universe that Africa is would let me be much better of a person, right? So if I take away knowledge of self and I take away education, I know that on the continent, all of the minerals, all of the vitamins, all of the natural things, materials that we need to live as humans are there. I know that the climate is there for me. I know that the ancestors are there. I know that I would see African print. I know that I would be in a busy marketplace. I know that we would trade and our economic would look different and our politics would look different, So I understand what you're asking, but I also know that I could be doing the same things I'm doing right here in America with the same benefits or non-benefits on the continent. It's no different. Even it's just no different.
All
It's not
right.
different, but I would feel better, I think, holistically if I was on the continent. I do, or anywhere across the diaspora where the African footprint, you can still see it, right?
True, true, true. Okay, thank you very much for this very good answer, very good explanation. You know what? I have the feeling when I read this book, The Miseducation of the Negro, uh, it feels like education is supposed to elevate us, bring us to another state to be able to do whatever we want. And after reading this book, I had the feeling that actually education of Black people in the United States was actually weaponized against us. If I can read a part of the book, page 6, this is not even the book itself, it's just the preface. And I can read this. Let me read it. And sorry for my awful accent. Sorry guys. Sorry. I was born speaking French, so please bear with me. So let me read this for you guys. No systematic effort towards change has been possible for thought, the same economics, history, philosophy, literature, and religion which have established the present code of morals. The Negro's mind have been brought under the control of his oppressor. I guess everything is said.
Yes.
So okay, this is a hell of a statement. This is a hell of a start on this book. So if I understand correctly, the oppressor, meaning the white people, they never had any intention to educate ourselves, right?
Right. So I think just before I go into the point that you're at now, let me just give a pre-context to the book, The Education of the Negro. Many have not read it. The title would lead you to believe that the book is actually talking about something that it is not. But what the book is really talking about is those Black folk who are educated, right, are then miseducating other Black folk.
True.
So that's what the book is about, as you know. And I think sometimes folk think the book means that white folk are miseducating Black folk, which it happens, but there's a step in between in which someone like myself, who has a PhD and I've been given a European education, I then take this knowledge and bring it back to my community. And my community easily accepts it because of the fact that I have a PhD and they think that the knowledge is real. And if I, as an African academic and scholar, don't recognize that, I would be out here further miseducating my sisters and brothers with this European education I was given. And so to your point, I think for us as Africans, it is knowledge that we need and not an education. I think that we allow this system, education is a system of, like you said, weaponization against us as African people. It is not giving us knowledge of anything at all, right? It's like indoctrinating us into the way of white life. It's Europeanizing us is what it's doing. And so the knowledge that we need of ourselves, it comes by way of our spirituality, by way of our physicality, our physiology, right? It's our genetics. It's our connection with the universe. It is our being that if we knew what that really truly meant, being the first people. And it is in no way to be like a European to say that we're a superior people, right? But there is also a recognition of when something is the first, as we do in all other aspects of life. Like we are comfortable as Africans being the first to achieve something, as opposed to being comfortable being Africans as being the first peoples. So what I'm trying to describe is that we need that true knowledge first, as opposed to just education. Mathematics is built in spirituality and in knowledge of who we are. It's not just some formula we put together and shoot out numbers, right? The same thing with science and literature, which we don't really talk about, African literature, the arts, right? All of the pieces that give us a sense of being. And so I would answer what you're stating to education is not what we need as African people. We need knowledge of self first.
Interesting. You know, the first part of your answer sounds like how can I put this? A Trojan horse, because you said that we Black people, we tend to miseducate other Black people. I have the feeling that was the whole strategy all along. Or am I misunderstanding what you say, or this is part of the plan?
That was part of the oppressor's plan. The oppressor knew that if they continue to give us this European version of history, that we would continue to give that same European version history to our sisters and brothers. And as you've read the book, there's a part in the book that speaks to this, right? And it sort of speaks to how if we were to, people say act white. The book says if we truly were acting white, then we would be doing what white people do and taking the knowledge that we have back into our community and opening up business and becoming our own sovereign community. So even with the European education that we are given, we're not acting like Europeans with it. We're not using the knowledge to go and build community with. And the reason we're not, as the brother Carter G. Woodson or the ancestor Carter G. Woodson stated, the reason we don't do that is because they tell us that Black folk can't manage money. They tell us that we can't manage our own businesses and have a sense of fiscal responsibility at the same time that they're supposed to be teaching us business ethics and etc. And the ancestor Carter G. Woodson talks about this, right? And that is where the problem is. We're not even taking this European education and using it like white people are using it, because it's being weaponized against us. We are receiving two messages at the same time. It's that double consciousness that W.E.B. Du Bois talks about. At the same time that they're giving us knowledge, they're also teaching us that we are nothing. They're also underwriting us in this same process, right? And so the counter narrative to that would be if we took this European education and acted like white folk, and we went and we opened up businesses and we created our own sovereign communities.
And you know, the funny thing is, now I'm just, again, we just started the book. You know, this is the chapter 1, and it says, let me quote it: the educated Negro have the attitude of contempt toward their own people, because in their own as well as their mixed school Negroes are thought to admire the Hebrew, the Greek, the Latin, and the Teuton, to despise the African. So this is exactly what we were talking about earlier. So we think we are educated, but we're not. We use this so-called education to miseducate our own people, and those who think we are educated are just belittling the rest of us. So I'm sorry, but the plan is so good. I have to give a credit to the oppressor.
Yeah, the oppressor, I don't think necessarily knew in the earlier years that they were going to be this successful. I think they wasn't expecting us to maintain it, right? And what we do now as African people, we help the colonizer maintain their power and their oppression. And now today, unfortunately, the colonizer is not just a European anymore. We have people who look just like us that are assisting and aiding in our own oppression. Because we have been introduced into an economic system that makes us believe that a dollar or a coin is more valuable than human life. And so we now have a disregard for human life. But as you know, in many African societies and probably in the Caribbean as well, that we just sort of trade it differently. We didn't, our economic exchange was a difference. I have the sugar, you have the salt, I give you a cup and you give me a cup kind of thing, right? It wasn't so much that it was a competition for resources. We are a communal people, and we never really had to compete in the way that we compete nowadays. There's always going to be disputes, just in general, people interactions across borders, right? Different ethnic groups, different languages, etc. So we expect some level of conflict between us. But the level of conflict that we have between us today is just something that was unheard of to our ancestors, especially in America.
So, okay. This book, if I recall correctly, was written in 1933, more or less. My parents were not even born, so it's been a while. So that was then. This is now 2021. Do you see, between what we just talked about, because we're going back and forth between this book and the actual state of Black education, what would be the difference, or is there any difference between what happened back in the days when this book was written and today? Could you describe us, to those who don't live in the United States, the educational system for Black people, especially for Black children? Can you describe us?
Yeah, that's great. And it will give some groundwork and some historical background. So I'm just going to start from 1619 in the United States. I chose 1619 because that is the first record of an enslaved African entering the new colonies. But as we all know, Africans were voyaging to this lands way before they came here enslaved.
True.
So in 1619, when the Europeans arrived here, they operated under British common law. That was the only we all know that British was the kingdom, and it operated here in the U.S. So from 1619 until 1789, so we're talking nearly a century and a half, Africans in this country were under the enslavement and under the rule of the British Crown. We in 1740 lost our right to knowledge. So 1619, the first enslaved African arrived. And in 1740, the right to education was legally taken away from us, right? It wasn't ever a big deal before this time, because as we understand, Africans were coming from all over the continent and being mixed together. So we wasn't speaking the same languages. There wasn't a sense of school. There wasn't a sense of anything in those first 100 years. But in 1740, an African man that was literate, he was enslaved, he got wind that there was turmoil going on in Spain. And he knew that there were, between England and Spain, there was tension. And he knew that since the Spanish was attacking the British, that the colonies in the New World were weakened because of the tension going on globally. And I think people need to understand at this point, as I'm talking, how this global network of things is happening simultaneously. This particular African was literate, got this information, and felt this was the best time to uprise against the colonizer in the New World because Britain was weak. The only way he was able to do that was because he was literate. And that happened in South Carolina in 1739. In 1740, the right to read and write was taken away from the African by law. It is the only the United States is the only place on the entire globe that ever introduced actual anti-literacy laws. So it might have been in practice, but it wasn't legislated. It wasn't a law. And so it was called the Stono Rebellion. The Stono Rebellion was the uprising against the colonizer that led to being unable to read and write. So in 1740, the education system in America for Black folks was established right then. It isn't one. It's illegal, right? So that's where it all began. And then as we progress forward from 1740, what we found in 1789 here in the U.S., Constitution were ratified. We have had our independence. And then because of the precedents, we established education without the African included. And then we get to where the African was included in the United States about 100 years after the Constitution was ratified in 1868. We had the 14th Amendment. It then said that all Africans are citizens. Okay. And because we are citizens, we get the rights that the Constitution provides. But I don't know how education is globally, but in the United States, the federal government does not guarantee a right to education. And I think many people need to understand that the Constitution of the United States does not guarantee its citizens a right to an education.
Oh, wait. Oh, wow. That's strong. That's strong. Reaction. We have a reaction about this. What? Okay, wait. Please say that again. I want to be sure everybody understands. Please say it again. Go ahead.
In the United States, our Constitution does not guarantee its citizens a right to an education.
I mean, what kind of country is this?
Let me give you the second part.
Go ahead.
Each individual 50 states provides education to its residents of its state. So within state constitution is where your right to an education it comes from, not the federal government. So as you know, there were 13 slave states, right?
True.
That wrote their constitutions. They then set the tone for what states should write in their constitutions as we inherited more states and stole more land, right? So in the U.S., constitutionally, your state is the one that has to provide you that right to education, not the federal government.
Wow. And that triggers my curiosity, but do you have any idea why? I mean, the federal government does not care about this. Why leaving the authority to the different states? Why? What was the strategy behind this?
It's a very simple question here in the U.S. So the way that the U.S. works, it's a states' rights. So all states have the ability to govern as they want. So that's the answer to it. We were set up as a states' rights nation. So we have the federal government that basically gives us the basic rights, but the right to an education was never considered a basic right. States gave those rights. And so education began in about 1850. I think Massachusetts was the first state to actually make public education available. And as you recall, and if you don't know, in the US, you didn't have public education in the South. You had a little bit of public education that started in the North in the 1850, but slave owners valued private education. They didn't, slave owners and the white men, that the founding fathers did not feel the government should give citizens education. That was a handout. It was free. This is a country that feels like you got to pull yourself up. So to give you an education was not in the philosophy of this country. If you want to be educated, you do that privately. You pay for that. You pay for knowledge. It's not something the federal government gives you. The reason why the United States today has public education is because of Black folk in the South said, we're no longer doing separate but equal. We want an equal education system. And so when Black folks in the South fought for an education, essentially, that is why there's a public education in the entire United States. Because Black people in the South wanted an education, especially after 1865. Right?
Yep.
So that is where public education comes from. So then the southern states began to put education into their legislation and laws. And then as we move westward in the United States, states sort of follow suit. Well, you'll find that most constitutions, state constitutions, mirror or reflect the federal government of the United States, but then it's states' rights. So states can choose to implement something like education however they want and choose.
Wow, that's whoa, that's the part of the story that I didn't know. Wow. So guys, I hope you're learning something. I told you, please don't forget to like, to share this video, because it's really important, because this is stuff that I never thought about. That's whoa. Okay, so if we have in the United States public education, thanks to Black people who fought for it. Okay.
So, not to cut you off, Shango, but we have 50 different public education systems. Okay. 50 different ones. They're not the same. It's 50 different public education systems in the United States.
Okay. So let's focus on that for one moment. Let's say I live in California. I have a master's degree in whatever, engineering or whatever. And then I decided to move to New York. Is my diploma valid, or is it worth something on the job market in New York, or what's happening?
So that's a great question. So in the US, since we do have these 50 different education systems, we have accreditation systems. And so most universities will subscribe to the same type of accreditation system. And so if your degree in California was given in an accredited system, that degree most likely will be accepted in another state because they have some of the same accreditations and standards. But there are instances where there are occupational licenses. So are you familiar with occupational licenses?
Yes.
So individuals who want to be a teacher has to get a license. HVAC techs has to get a license. So those occupational licenses, in order to do your job, you have to be licensed to do it.
True.
If you move from one state to another, you have to get recertified in that new state. It will not accept it in an occupational license. Now, the process isn't long, right? You don't have to go back to school. You just have to prove that the education that you received in Virginia is comparable to the education in California. However, you cannot cross lines. So I don't know if you've ever heard someone say, I can practice law in California, but I can't practice law in Detroit, right?
Yeah.
So because it's 50 different systems. And where that hurts us as African people, we are very few in numbers as attorneys, as is. And so if we have our best attorneys are in California, but we have issues happening in Virginia, we can't get that best Black African California attorney to come in and be our representation in Virginia unless that attorney requests for Virginia to accept their law credentials from California. So yes, you cannot use your credentials in this US. You have to request for that state by state.
So you said a very good point, because let's say, first of all, black people in the United States, it's represent 13 to 15% of the entire population. So and we know, if we know that with a certain amount of lawyers across the country, I need a very good lawyer, because but in my states there is no good lawyer.
A good lawyer.
So I'm doomed.
You're doomed. Or you can reach out to that good lawyer and ask that they get registered in your state. But that's not a free process. That lawyer would have to pay to get registered in that state so that they can represent you.
Huh. I was wondering. Okay,
And that's the same for healthcare. A great black African doctor in California cannot come and be there for you in Virginia unless they are licensed in Virginia to practice medicine. So that's it's not a small thing. It's a very big, huge, major thing, right? We talk about education. A great set of black teachers are located in the South in this country for various reasons. It's where most of the black people are. So we have a lot of black and African children west that are not getting those great teachers that are coming out of the South. And those teachers just can't up and move and go because their license is not recognized until they ask the state to recognize their license to teach.
So, okay, let's focus on that for 1 second, because we talk about the book that was then, this is now. Can you explain the situation of the education of black children? Because you said something very interesting, and in my opinion, very critical, because the children you just mentioned, how do they achieve a decent education? What happened to them? I have the feeling this is a sacrificed generation. So can you tell us a bit about this?
Yeah, I mean, even though there are 50 separate public education systems, we must all know that they all are built on institutional and systemic racism, right? So the outcomes across this state for black children are nearly the same. They're just negative, poor outcomes because institutional and systemic racism is so pervasive. And so what we have are, like you said, it's a black children who are not being educated at all. Carter G. Woodson at least gave credit to those that were being educated, in quotes, right? That could go out and deliver the message. But now we're at a point where we're asking, where are our youth? Where are the Fred Hamptons of the world? And it's like our youth don't have any tools to start with or begin with at all. They're not even being miseducated by the system. They're just simply not being educated. In the US, I believe less than 10% of black children are reading on a third grade level by the 8th grade. Like less, like it's like our children can't read is what I'm saying. They're not reading at all. They're not learning how to read. And as you can imagine, if you can't read, you can't do much else, because if you need to solve a math problem, you got to read through it to solve it. If you need to solve a scientific phenomena, you got to read to solve it. So the first thing that this country does immediately upon when our children enters the education system is deny them the right to read. But as I told you, in 1740, that was the law.
Exactly.
It changed the law. It just manifests as different. You can look at national reading scores of black children and you can see that only 30% of black children nationally can read. That's it. 30% of black children in this country are literate. So there are 70% of black children are illiterate.
Wow. And just to go through to prolong what you just said, if I read this part of the book, it said the result then is that the Negro, thus miseducated, are no services for themselves and none to the white man. The white man does not need the Negro's professional, commercial, or industrial assistance, of course, because they are uneducated.
Exactly. Why would I educate you when I don't need your services? And when education in the 1930s, in the era that Carter G. Woodson and all Europeans wanted was a smart nigga. We're going to put it like that in quotes, right? So the only reason why you were given an education then even was so that you could be an educated Negro. Not so that you can be on par with me, but so that you can just be a little bit more educated in your interactions with me.
Let me read this comment for you, because that's written in French from Skeza Senu. He or she, I don't know who that person is. I am very shocked, truly shocked by what she's saying. Because, a lot of us don't even think about the state of education in the United States, because a lot of us have the idea of the United States is a great country, everything is fine. Yes, sometimes there are killings, all right, it's bad, but everything is fine. This is a country where everybody wants to move. This is, like they said, the pursuit of happiness. And now you are dragging us to the horrible truth, and you're telling us literally that, well, it was totally legal to not educate Black children, and actually they didn't change a damn thing. They just redesigned it.
Yeah, redesign, exactly. And you can just look at the numbers and the statistics that are out there. Like, I'm not making it up. Just 30% of Black children can read. We in the United States, I'm going to share with you the term that is used here and maybe haven't been heard across the diaspora. It's called functional illiterate. So you're illiterate, but you're functional, right? You can go to work, you can make money, you can pay bills. But when it comes time to you looking at a legal document and reading it, or a policy to interpret and how it's impacting you, we don't have the skill sets in this country to do so. And so we talk about how we're looking for Black Americans to come back to the continent with their skills and talents and intelligences and helping us to redeem and liberate the continent. And that sounds great. But let's be honest, there is very few people in the United States that are literate and could even do that, right? And Carter G. Woodson talks about it in the book towards the end about, the lack of truly educated Black folk. I think he mentions it as 1 of 10,000 or something. It's in the chapter right before the appendix. Mm-hmm. But he mentions the percent of really truly educated Black folk that they are. So while the continent and diaspora is looking to the U.S. Black folk to really bring our skills, talents, and intelligences, we are not the ones probably to be looking at that way, one. And two, as you would be able to relate very quickly to this statement, we are monolingual. Okay? We speak English. That's all Black Americans speak. That is it. And because of the transmission of slavery in different dialects, we have Creole and patois and all these different dialects. Our Caribbean sisters and brothers speak them, but truly Black Americans are monolingual. So even if we were to go back to the continent, I don't even know who speaks English as a first language on the continent. I don't probably know one. It's probably like a second language, right? I can't speak French even. I can't speak Spanish. I don't know any of our ethnic mother tongues. So we as Black Americans, while people look towards us, our education system actually makes us quite ineffective as a people to look towards. We might want to look to our more trilingual, bilingual African sisters and brothers, because there's something that comes along with language, intelligence, right? There's plenty of research that shows that bilingual and trilingual people's brain has a higher level of thinking and a higher level of intelligence than a monolingual person.
Exactly.
So when we think about education in a sense, you got to think about we're not even taught more than one language here. Very monolingual. Very much so.
That's a lot to digest. So please, let's have a short break. We'll be back right after this. welcome back to the African Chronicle. This is the Book of the Day Live number 4, and we are still live with our guest, Dr. Evandra Catherine, and we are discussing about the educational system in the United States for Black children, and we are discussing also about this very brilliant book that I advise you to read, The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson. So you were saying something earlier before the break, very interesting, and somehow I knew, but the recall was a little bit punchy. Most of Black people can barely speak English.
Yeah,
That's it.
exactly. It's called African American Vernacular English, or it's called Ebonics. But we don't really truly speak standard English anyways, because of just the transmission of our African ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
So, but in general, we're monolingual in a sense.
Wow. So please, guys, don't forget, if you have any comment to share, to tell us about your personal education system outside the United States, please let me know, and I will show the comment outline. I will pop them out, and I will ask our guests to react on that. Don't be shy. Yeah, I know the language could be a barrier, but you see, my English sucks, and I'm still here. So if I can do it, you can do it too. All right. What we have here, we have Obame Basong. Damn, we are foolish, our own people with that education. Yeah, somehow, yeah. We fall into the trap of the white man, and we think we are good, we are wealthy, whatever. But no, exactly. This is a trap. What do we have here again? We have Keza Sinu. I agree with you. Many countries speak English now, even the so-called French countries. Okay, but still, let's not forget, people, this is the language of the colonizer.
It is.
It is. I speak French because, hey, my ancestors were invaded by French.
So. Exactly. But we don't, that shouldn't be our first tongue, right? We have some kind of language, African language, that we should speak, some dialect, something, and I don't mean to cut you off in sort of this moment here, but our Black children, they enter into schools not speaking standard English, right? And so I want to give you an example of what that means for them. So the words in the English language, the TH sound, right? The TH sound is not a typical sound in the African dialect. We just don't make that sound in our languages, in our original languages. So the way that we pronounce words here with the TH sound, we often would turn it into an F sound. So like the word with, W-I-T-H, we say with, or fifth, or sixth, or seventh, or whatever the TH sound is. Our children are remediated because they don't speak proper English. But truthfully, in African dialect, there's just no TH sound. Like, we don't have that in our language naturally. So it's forced upon us to speak with the TH sound. And oftentimes our youngest children are being raised by big mama and grandma. And as as time has gone on, those individuals have gotten younger. But before, they were much older, and they would translate down these original dialects that left out certain sounds like the TH sound or the PH sound. Or even if you think about verbs, the to be verb, African people, we will sometimes leave out the verb to be because we talk all knowingly. So I don't need to use be, right? You know who I am. Be, we are. So we'll oftentimes do that, or we use double negatives. That is all part of African dialect, right? And so we are remediated for it. We're put in special education for it. We're given learning disabilities for it. We're told we can't speak English. And truthfully, they're denying us the right. They're denying us the knowledge that our ancestors didn't even use that sound. And you may be familiar, if you speak multiple languages, some sounds aren't present in some languages.
True. Exactly. True. Wow. So I realized that's very interesting, because we are going back and forth from the book and from the actual state of Black children education. So I realized nothing has really changed. Because if I read again, okay, I have another question for you, because we said earlier that the miseducated Black person serve the white man or have no very good service. You talked earlier about the how do you say it again? The proper illiteracy. What was the expression again?
Functionally illiterate.
Functionally illiterate. That's tough. I mean,
It's right. It's like being called a functional alcoholic, right?
damn, you can't read, but that's okay somehow. That's
Yeah,
okay. You can
you can
still do your
function.
job.
Yeah. And it's acceptable because the white man don't need us, right? So it's totally acceptable. If you can greet me, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir, I can ring it up for you, right? As long as I can say yes, sir, yes, ma'am, okay, and thank you. That's all they need me to know. Just that's it. I don't need to have better English than that. I don't need to be able to read. If I can't read, I can't interpret policies against me. I can't defend myself in a court of law. I can't ask for the resources that should be given to me because I can't read. They still allow you in the US to sign your signature with an X if you are illiterate because you don't have the ability to read or write. So you are still able to sign with an X on a legal document if you're illiterate.
You know, I'm laughing, but okay, hold on, because I've seen this in movies, in caricatures, in cartoons, you know, because I thought that was just a joke. But
no.
But you're telling me right now in 2021, no, brother, that's not a joke. That's for real.
It's for real. If you're illiterate, you can legally sign with an X, and that indicates that you signed as an illiterate person or a person that can't write or a person that doesn't know how to sign their name. You can put an X. Yes. Yeah. Yes. And then they even have legal documents here where if you're illiterate, particularly like on your voter registration, there's an indicator that another person can sign your name for you so that you can be registered to vote because you can't sign because you can't read or write. So we even have these sort of places where the government is able to take us in, even in our illiteracy, and still use our numbers politically.
So yeah, that's a very good trick because we don't need you to read. I need you to vote. Yep. You can't sign, but tell someone to sign for you. I want your vote, but I don't want to educate you.
Right. And if you can't read or write, how can you even know what your candidate is presenting as a platform to know that you're supposed to vote for them? Right. So you have people out here, 70% functionally illiterate, participating in a democracy, voting against their self-interest, what Black folks constantly do. Constantly sitting here voting in the same white man from past because you are functionally illiterate. He told you his platform, and within his platform, it says, I will give Africans lesser resources than everybody else. But because you can't read, you didn't see it, so you voted for him.
So, okay, before we go back and forth to the book, I'd like to have, tell me, you're not the only one who's aware about this in the United States. What is the reaction, the reflection, the thought about Black people in the United States? Tell me you're not alone, and a lot of you guys are reacting or try to think about changing stuff. Tell me give me something. Give me hope.
Carter G. Woodson said it best. We are miseducating one another. I mean, it's what's happening, right? The white man tells me, Black woman, you're nothing, and gives me a PhD. Black woman, me with a PhD, is going to go back into the Black community and tell more Black people they are nothing. Okay? That's all Carter G. Woodson is saying. But me, I got knowledge of self along the way. Mm-hmm. So the white education that was given to me, I've Africanized. And so now my goal is to ensure that the information that comes from me is not the European education that I was given, but yet an Africanized version of that European education I was given. But part of our problem really is that functional illiteracy, because we participate politically, economically, and socially illiterately. I don't even think illiterately is a word, but you see what I'm saying? We participate in these spaces functionally illiterate. So we can't liberate ourselves. We can't seek sovereignty. We can't seek security because you can't even read what that looks like or interpret it.
Damn.
And you can't write your own policies so that you can govern yourselves because you can't write. In the US, maybe 10 years ago now, they took cursive out of the curriculum. Children only learn print now. So children aren't even learning cursive writing. So, which means that you can't sign your name. If you're not taught cursive writing, You can't literally sign your name on anything. You write print. So we are fighting in the US, and we haven't had cursive in our curriculum in probably over a decade. My son is in the 5th grade. He goes to middle school next year. He can't write in cursive.
Really?
No. I could teach him when it's necessary how to sign his name, but my son doesn't know how to write in cursive. He does everything on the computer, types it up. He's not writing it at all. It's all typed. His penmanship is decent, but who cares when you're typing it all up? And he's signing it an e-signature, electronic signature, right? The things that make things legal, your signature, right? Kids aren't even taught how to cursive. The private education system is still teaching these things, but the public education system is not.
You have this comment from Obama Basson, who said, Malcolm X said, if you let your kids being taught by the oppressors, it's a done deal. Yeah.
Deal. It's a done deal. It's a done deal. You do. We have to get back to homeschooling and private schooling and get in our own African-centered curriculum. And the thing about it is, Shango, is that the laws and regulations to do so are so easy and flexible. Like all we don't have is the building, right? And the resources to put inside that building. But this country, as oppressive as it is, to privately educate your child, it's pretty damn easy to do. As long as your child passes those tests to get into the university, ACT or the SAT, that's all that matters, right? So to educate your own child in this country is fairly easy to do. It's very lax.
Before we go into this, I'd like to read, I would like to talk about another part of the book, because I've read in this book that, and I realized it back in the days, but again, let me say that book was written in 1933. Black people don't want to work for another Black person. That was written in 1933. And guess what? Maybe 10 years ago, I've experienced it. Black people, they don't want to take orders from another Black foreman. Okay, my first question is, why? According to you, why would be this? Why a Black person would refuse to receive orders from another Black person? That's my first question.
It's a quick answer. Carter G. Woodson said it already. It's because we are told that Black people can't supervise. Black people can't manage. Black people can't run a business. Black people can't do anything. So if we are told that, the last thing we're looking for is another Black man to tell me what to do. We think that what white people say is golden. And if we say it, somebody wants to fact check us for saying it, right? It's a very simple question. Carter G. Woodson said it back in the 1930s. You tell me that Black people ain't nothing, so when a Black person tries to come to me, I'm going to think that they're nothing. So no, I don't want to be supervised for you. Matter of fact, I don't even want to shop Black, right? I don't even want to buy your products because they're subpar to white people, and white people get all their products from China in the first place, right? So you sitting here not wanting to shop Black, spend your money with white folk, and they getting all their products from China, but they making the money off of it. We just don't want to do for self.
Do you think it's the continuation of the Willie Lynch syndrome, divide and conquer?
Yeah, it's a combination of that, but honestly, it's capitalism at its finest, right? If you're looking for a product in a capitalist state, you pay money for you want your money to be used in its best way. If you feel like African products are of a lesser quality in a capitalist system, you don't want to take your hard-earned dollars and spend them on a lesser quality. But that's a fallacy, right? We know it's a fallacy, and we also don't respect the shared history. We know that Black businesses have to charge a bit more because we can't get direct from the continent. It's a middleman we got to pay. But while we got these Europeans over here oppressing everybody and getting direct from Asia or getting direct from Mexico, imposing tariffs on borders that don't exist, right? But we as African people, we don't have our own government or economic system in which or maritime abilities in which we can trade across these borders and purchase products and get products to make our own products here in the US and broadly. And so we will always find that to be our greatest problem because one, we already think our products are inferior, and two, they're going to be more expensive than the Europeans' products. So why am I going to do that? It seems to make no sense on the education that I was given and my functional illiteracy that I would take my hard-earned dollars and pay more for something that's of lesser quality.
True.
Right.
So we established that back in the days, 1933, Black people refused to work for other Black people. They were because they were taught that way.
Yeah.
And I remember probably 15, 20 years ago, I experienced the same thing. I was a boss of, I had to manage a team, and I had problem with Black people. They refused to get order from me.
No, Black people are Black Americans. Like, how is this phenomena globally? Because I feel like my understanding of trade and purchasing and buying Black in the continent, I always see these large marketplaces, and I always see nothing but Africans at these marketplaces and things like that. When I've traveled to the Caribbean, I'm interfacing with all Black people, etc. So is this a global sort of phenomena, or how does that look globally outside of this context?
It is, because I realized that, that's the reason why I really want people to react and tell us their own experience, because this is exactly what I've experienced. Many times, Black people refuse to take orders from another Black person, not only in the United States, but outside of the United States. And I have the feeling it's still happening as we speak. Due to, again, the lack of education, the lack of knowledge of yourself, and the miseducation. You are the literally functional and all that. So I'm afraid, yes, the syndrome is still working on as we speak today. And there is, let me share you this. In addition, it continues until today, but what a yeah, it is. This is something really that bothers me, because I have the feeling that although we have the context, the historical context, we have this book that explains almost everything. We have a French author called Frantz Fanon.
Yes.
We're doing the very same thing. We have books that tell us everything, and yet we keep doing the same thing over and over.
You said the key word. It's in a book. If you can't read, what's up good as a book? So all the knowledge that us as African people need, we know it's in books. And I know that people here today has heard, if you don't want a Black person to know, put it in a book. I don't know if you've never heard that. It is an ongoing thing here in the U.S. It's said all the time. If you don't want a Black person to know something, put it in a book. Yep. But all of the blueprints that were left for us by the ancestors were either in books, or because we're a storytelling people, all of those that could tell the stories have either been assassinated or put in jail. So True. It leads us to the books. We don't have the ground storytellers anymore. And if 70% of us are illiterate.
We take a quick break. We'll be back. We take a short break. We'll be back right after this. Don't move. All right, we are back to the African Chronicles. This is the Book of the Day Live with our guest, Dr. Evandra Catherine. Please, guys, don't forget to like, to share, and to subscribe, or everybody going to think that you're a hater. And I hope you're not a hater. Are you? All right. So back to the subject, the miseducation of the Negro. So I realized that that was then, this is now. The same patterns go on over and over and over. And I guess we found out what's the root cause, because we are illiterate. We don't read. And why should we read? Because I can't read anyway. So why would I read? Okay. Now that we I guess we found what's the root cause. And then, yes, something else. I realized Carter G talks a lot about church. A lot of church. Church this, church that, church. Okay, hold on. Wait. No school, but church? What's your take on that?
I wish that the church were more effective. It's really all I could say about that. But like any other education system, we can view the church as another form of an education system. And they're miseducating us on even our spirituality to begin, right? So I don't know why today we can't look back to the one, even though church has always sort of spoken about Christianity the way that it is still today, but we also did use it to feed our community and to educate our community and to fill in the gaps in our community when they were there. But now, because of our federal system here, churches are federally designated as 501c3s or as nonprofits. And so in the US, if you are designated as a nonprofit, you are prohibited from certain activities, and or you could lose that status. And what that status does is it provides you tax exemptions, essentially, and charity exemptions, right? So we're taking tax exemptions and charity exemptions and giving up our liberties and our freedoms that we could use our church systems for. And so now you have churches that are trying to find an alternative to being a nonprofit status according to the IRS. And so that's what we find the problem with churches. They have been stripped away from the very activities that we as African people needed the church for by default of this designation.
And do you have the feeling that the church today are trying to be a part of the solutions, or they still like I would call it the pastor haste back in the days? They teach you stuff, they preach, give money to the church, and that's about it. Do you have the feeling that it's a little bit changing today as we speak, or this is still the same?
Well, I don't know about globally, but what's happened in the US is young people don't go to church anymore. So now church congregants are really old. Like you're talking about 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And as we know, that's retirement monies. And so a lot of churches now just don't have the financial backings or resources to be effective, because young folk, while we are illiterate and we get hit with propaganda, what we don't believe anymore is the story of white Jesus. And so to go into these churches and be constantly told the story of white Jesus, and church tells you everything in the world that you can't do, everything that's bad, but it don't tell you what's good, and it doesn't prepare you to be an adult. So in the US, the church has now become ineffective because it's a gap in generations. It's a huge gap. Like the 80s babies, the 90s babies, and the 2000s babies do not go to church anymore. So that's the problem with church in the US. It's a very widely known thing, and pastors are trying to figure out how to get the 70s, 80s, and 90s and 2000s babies back in the church. But church is probably average age now, probably in the 40s average age. There's no little babies running around. Ain't no Sunday schools no more. You know, there's no one to do the work that needs to be done because the elderly shouldn't be doing it. So anyways, not to go on and on, honestly, our churches are suffering because of the message that these pastors are putting out. It's not a message we want to hear. Although we drink the European juice, we don't want to go to church and be oppressed.
And that's the funny thing, because we said earlier that most of the Black people are basically illiterate. They refuse now. More of them are refusing the church because they say there is nothing good in church. So what do they do to make a change? They barely can read. They don't go to church anymore. But anyway, I'm not trying to defend church, because we know church has been our allies.
I think our children need to get back in there. So I am with you, right? Like, I know that the church, while it has its negatives, I know it does give you an understanding of morals, values. It gives you some grounding, something to build from. And right now, with our children not going to church at all, they don't even have a moral grounding to start from which to work from. They don't know what integrity is, what loyalty is, what trust is, love, honesty, compassion, empathy, sympathy, etc. Church teaches you this, right? They don't understand what it means to not be so accepting of things. People talk so many years about how the church was towards homophobia, and it was just a big thing, right? But now look where we are today, right? Homophobia in the gay agenda is just widespread. But it's because we are not even given at least enough knowledge to understand whether it's something that we fully accept or not accept. And I use homophobia just because it's very well known in the church. But there are plenty of other things that are happening as a result of not having this moral grounding. And so I'm a mother. I don't go to church, right? I don't want to hear baby Jesus' story. My son is being raised by his grandmother, and she tells him the story of baby Jesus every day, right? I am thankful to her for giving my son that grounding and that foundation to work from. And as his mother, I will give him the African parts of that. But he needs it because we all need to know some sense of what a moral and a value is. We can't just keep accepting things. And without it, you accept all things. So I think you and I share the same sentiment when it comes to church. Yes, I get it. It is not where you should probably go for knowledge, but it definitely is where you should go to be human and to understand what it means to have these human-like qualities. We out here acting like the colonizer want us to act, angry and barbaric. Without church, you're going to be angry and barbaric acting out here. So.
You have a question from Obame Basong. She said, Shango Adu, I have a question. Can Dr. Evandra tell us, is it hard to open an African school in the US? What is the state of the homeschooling in the US? But before you answer this, let's have a quick break. We are going back, guys. And we are back to the African Chronicles Live, the Book of the Day Live number 4 with our guest, Dr. Evandra Catherine. And I just had a text from my mom telling me, oh, my dear boy, I love what you're doing, but I do not understand a damn word because I don't speak any English. Let me say that in French for 1 second for my mom. Maman, j'ai reçu ton message. Je suis désolé que tu ne comprennes pas un mot de ce que je dis, mais je te promets, maman, je vais t'expliquer juste après quand j'ai fini l'émission. All right. That was the bit of the humor. But let's back to the question. Yes. What is, I think homeschooling would be a solution. But before we go into this, into further, let's try to answer this question. Do you think it's really hard to open Afrocentric African school in the United States? That's the first part of the question. And the second part is, what is the state of homeschooling in the US? That's a very interesting question. Thank you, Obama. Go ahead.
So that's a great question. So it's really something I got to put into perspective, right? So we know there's 50 different public education systems in the US. So it makes it extremely easy to open an African school and homeschool. And I just sort of mentioned it earlier. It's very lax. And this is the reason why. The purpose of your school of education is how hard or not it wouldn't be. If you opened up your own African school right now, you got the building, you got the money, you just taught children how you wanted to teach them right now. To what standard are you teaching them? Why would the federal government or a state government care what you're teaching them? What is the goal after you teach them? Is it for them to go to technical school or is it for them to go to a university, right? So you got to understand that K2 through 12 education only has benefit if there's a plan afterwards. And since the US feel like there's no plan afterwards, that's why they're not educating anyway, right? It's the plan afterwards. So if the children you are educating are planning to go to technical training school, you would just make sure through your education that you're preparing them to take that test they have to take to get through that license they need at that technical school. If your children are going to a university, you want to make sure whatever you're teaching them, they will be able to pass the SAT or AACT to get into the university. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you're not preparing them for anything, right? So there's no regulation, there's no law that's going to stop you from educating someone. It's just that you, as that educator, have to make sure that you're educating them with whatever standardized questions these Europeans are going to need them to answer, because those tests are going to be European tests. So what we as Black people can do, we can do all of this today, as long as we are preparing them for liberation and redemption. We are preparing them to redeem us, to liberate us, to get to sovereignty. There's no test to take for that. That's all action. That's all philosophy. That's all the mind, being a thinking person. So to answer your question, is it hard to make an African a thinking person? No, it's not. But what do you want them to do after you train them to be a thinking person? Do you want them to go to technical school, which is the only other option sort of to that university education? And we know that debate when we talk about Booker T. Washington and Du Bois. Booker T. Washington felt that we should be educated to be technical folk. Du Bois felt like we should be educated to go to universities. So the question remains, what do you want those in which you are educating to do after they leave?
Exactly. We have to have a strategy, a plan for the future. And you know, it sounds so relevant, so easy. So, but why is it? It's a feeling, because I don't live in the United States. Why is it? I have the feeling that the homeschooling and the African school, I don't seem to see a lot of them. And what's that? And let me open a big bracket. Why is it that this man called Umar Johnson has so much difficulties to open his own school? Because he keeps talking about it. And we just stated that it's not that complicated as long as you have a plan for the future. So why is it this man has so much difficulties to open his own school, African oriented? I don't get it.
You want to know why? Where is he going to get the resources? It must come from us. We do not fund our liberation. That's why. It ain't the fact that we don't got people out here that can't teach and educate. We don't fund our own liberation. And if the United States is already paying billions of dollars a year for public education, where are they going to give you money for to build another education system? So we have to fund our own liberation. The Black Panther Party did it the right way. So that is the answer. Umar Johnson has a problem because who's funding it? It would have to be us.
Oh, that's wow. You know what? I'm speechless.
Who's feeding these kids? Who's picking them up? Who's paying for the gas? Who's paying for the lights? Who's paying for the books? Who's paying for the field trips? Who's paying for the teachers? And not only who's paying for the teachers, are we giving teachers a livable wage? Where are these monies coming from? We are so quick to spend our monies with the Europeans. You know how it works. We got $1 trillion across the diaspora, but it leaves out of the Black community in 6 hours. We have all this buying power, but we spend it on entertainment, cars, and alcohol. The statistics are there. We ain't spending none of that money on education.
That's true. And you know what saddens me is that we don't see the value of investing our money into the future of our own kids. And we're still at the same place. We didn't move a step forward. We didn't do anything, and we keep complaining that the situation is not changing, but we don't do anything to make a change. So I was wondering, okay, so if we cannot fund our own schools, so homeschooling, so I guess I have to educate my children by myself at home. That would be the best solution until the mindset is changed.
But let's think about homeschooling broadly. They're not teaching your children in your home. Homeschool doesn't have to be in your home. I could get a church basement and turn it into homeschool, right? And those kids come there, and I have a set of educators that teach them. I, as the parent, doesn't have to be the educator for it to be homeschool. And that we got to think about homeschool broadly in the sense we just need a building or space. And we call it homeschooling, right? Most people who homeschool aren't just teaching their kids in that home. They have other folks' children that are coming into that homeschooling collective or collaborative. So we need to think about homeschooling beyond putting the onus on the parent who needs the work, and think about homeschooling from a community perspective, as the Black Panthers did, because the Black Panthers had homeschools.
Exactly.
Right.
I have the feeling that not only we are not putting the money where we should put it, and we are suffering from a strong lack of organization. We try to find solutions by ourselves, but we don't organize, unify, and try to together find any solution. Because I do remember 100 years ago, we built our community. It was called Black Wall Street. We used to own everything.
Yep.
And today we don't have anything. And I still don't get it. Why now we have the internet, where all the infrastructures, and we still don't get it? What's happening?
We still don't get it. And, as you talk about Black Wall Street, that's the part that Black Americans just seem to not understand. So we have this idea that we can create sovereign Black or African communities in the U.S. Okay. It is plenty of historical examples of all Black functioning communities. And in every one of those examples, the government's military has completely demolished them. And when I say the government's military, I'm not talking about the Air Force, the Navy, the Army, the Coast Guard. Those exist to protect these borders of the United States, protect our air and water. The KKK is the U.S. government's military. And every Black community that was ever destroyed was destroyed by the KKK. And so what we as African people have not making that second step towards, brother, the ancestor Marcus Garvey had the African Legion. We had our own military, our own security. We ain't gonna ever have nothing that's all Black and sustainable if we don't defend ourselves. We don't want to take up arms. How the hell are we gonna have our own communities and spaces? We present a threat to anybody, any nation. And when we all on one accord and we all got the same goal, there is no way we're not going to be vulnerable to an attack. And we want to have this immaculate Black African sustaining community, but we ain't out here talking about no security. And like I said, because we're functionally illiterate and we vote against our interests, we will allow people to believe that gun control is what we need. No, Africans need to strap up. Don't tighten up control on them guns. First of all, we want to strap up. And in the United States, if you have a felony, you don't have the right to carry a gun. So, of course, they slap felonies on us, right? And also, if you have any kind of mental health issues, I mean, let's not talk about racial trauma, right? You can't carry a gun. This country has been very effective in limiting the number of those of us who can even protect ourselves when half of us got a felony. Set in jail, serve your time, paid your restitution, and you still can't get your gun rights back. So, well, I'm saying all of this to state I would be very happy if we could have sovereign African communities in the U.S., but without military protection, it will never sustain itself. It will be another Tulsa, Oklahoma. It'll be another Wilmington, another Richmond, another New York, right? And anywhere we have all Black communities that the KKK have burned down and destroyed.
But do you think, I think your point is really relevant, but do you think today, as we speak, the Black community, most of it is aware of what you're just saying, or why they don't care as long as they party, they have drinks and put the songs up and have fun and all that twerking? And but do you think, okay, let me rephrase, do you think there is some kind of a change in the mindset of the community, some kind of awakening, or is flat out dead?
No. I would definitely say that there is an awakening, right? I would not deny the African essence that is in us still, even though many have been Europeanized. The ancestors are in us, and the youth are waking up in a different way. The only problem that we have in this awakening in the United States is we have an organization that people seem to believe is all they need to listen to. And that's the Black Lives Matter organization. But Black Lives Matter doesn't have a liberation goal. They don't have a sovereignty goal. But most of the Black people are feeling the ancestors in them. They don't know that's what they're feeling, but it's telling them to do more. It's telling them to protest. It's telling them to stop accepting oppression. But Black Lives Matter is not the philosophy in which we need these youth engaging in, because it is not one of separatism, but it is one of assimilation still. It is one of acculturation. It is one of an ask and not do for self. So that philosophy is what's hurting us. But the energy and the awakening, it's there. but there's no one guiding that energy. And we need that energy to be guided. We need that energy to be nurtured and mentored. And we need that energy to be effective. And right now, Black Lives Matter is just taking all that energy and doing nothing with it, because it's not thinking about the diaspora. It's thinking about America. And then you got other organizations called the African Descendants of Slaves. That organization, ADOS, their philosophy is exclusive of all Africans. So now you got to be a descendant of a slave. What do you mean? How about just an African? So in the US, we have organizations with power and influence, but they don't have the right philosophy for what you and I are talking about on this call right now. And so in order to do that, we need something to happen. Right. And it's not this great Messiah, this all leader. And it's not even for me to even put myself in that category or toot my head. But I oftentimes wonder why my message could never be more broader. But then we get caught up in America on who the messenger is. Now we don't like the person giving the message.
Yeah, I realize that this is unfortunately, this is the same problem over and over, not only in the United States but outside in the Black community. I've noticed, and I've noticed that. But I have this question since I used to say to friends that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. The wheel already exists. We had, in my opinion, one of the huge solution, Pan-Africanism, meaning Black people around the world should talk to each other, work with each other in order to achieve that goal. So how come from this book written in 1933, and guys, I advise you to buy this book. Really, you will find the link in the description below. Please, really interesting book. So back in the day, 1933, the miseducation of the Negro, and today, 21st century, 2021, I have the feeling we didn't move that so much. So I keep wondering, why is it we still moving forward, but so slowly? So, I mean, and we keep having conversation like this. We try to share the knowledge, try to share the messages, try to share information to make a change. How is it? Why is it that so long to make people change? I have the feeling I won't see a definitive change in my lifetime. I'm afraid. I wish, but I have the feeling it's not going to happen. In your opinion, why is it? And we know the history of African American is rich, full of good, positive, negative thing, but we have the memory of history. So how come we didn't make a move that faster than this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really great question. And I think it touches on all the pieces that we talked on, especially the illiterate part. Like, we have to keep coming back to that because we can't do anything without that. But what I want to say about Pan-Africanism is that when we think about our entire picture that affects us holistically, right? If we think about Pan-Africanism was sort of the cultural aspect of things, right? So Pan-Africanism kept us together as one. We all look back to the continent. We all know what it is to be African. And I just think of it like culturally. And Brother Nkrumah speak on this a little bit too. But we have to think about our social conditions, our economic conditions, and our political conditions. And Pan-Africanism didn't fully address those parts, right? And so while we express in the US all the time now through our hair, through our clothes, through t-shirts, through music, like African culture, what it is to be Black. Pan-Africanism is just manifest differently, but it is what it means to be an African is Pan-Africanism. And so, as Brother Nkrumah and others said, we needed some kind of social policy. And so some of them introduced socialism, right, during the Pan-African Conference. But not everybody was agreeing to socialism. And they just thought Nkrumah was way far off with socialism. But if we look now in history, you have a lot of like Arab, all these other ethnicities, but they also have socialism that is a part of the work that they do, right? They're not capitalists, right? And And so I want to say this in the most clearest way, but we have to think beyond our cultural connection, what it means to be Black, our essence, and think about our social conditions, how to address those, how to address our economic conditions, right? Capitalism is not it. How do we address our political conditions? The way that we used to govern ourselves before, we had councils of the elders, right? We didn't have to go out here and vote for these politicians and ask these folks to govern us, to get things done, disputes that happen between people. The elders handled that, right? Pan-Africanism can't handle that part. And so while Pan-Africanism is great, we've got to think about the other areas that we are not doing well in, socially, economically, and politically, right? On top of Pan-Africanism. And then Pan-Africanism needed to be embedded in our social plan. Pan-Africanism needs to be embedded in our economic plan and our political plan. Because if those plans do not include sovereignty and liberation, then it's not a Pan-African plan. Mm-hmm. Right? And right now, what we see are a ton of these plans out here that benefit European. There's nothing Pan-African about them. And so we need Pan-Africanism, but we need Pan-Africanism in our social life, Pan-Africanism in our political life, and Pan-Africanism in our economic life, which means every goal is the liberation and the sovereignty of the continent and the entire diaspora.
Thank you very much for this precision. That's really important, in my opinion. Thank you very much. Guys, I really want you to be part of the conversation. We are about to open the line, and I really want you to participate, ask questions to our guests, or just share your personal experience. We'll have a short break and we'll be right back. Yeah. And we are back to the African Chronicles, the book of the day live number 4. We are guest Dr. Evandra Catherine. We were discussing about the miseducation of the Negro in the United States and what would be the best solution to educate our Black children in the United States, but also across the world. So if you have any experience, questions to share with our guests, please be back. Be part of this conversation. Don't be shy. I will not bite you unless you really want me to. That will be awkward, but I can do it if you want me to. I really can, but I don't want to. All I want is having you around and ask questions to our guests, talk, exchange, and this is good. So let me send again the link right here. Guys, don't be shy. Don't be shy. Our guest is very fantastic. We have a huge guest with us. So please be part of the conversation. Don't be shy. And I give you 1 second. And in the meantime, I'll bring this. All right, back live, the book of the day live number 4. We are guest Dr. Evandra Catherine. We were discussing the miseducation of Black people in the United States. That was then. This is now. Obviously, nothing has really changed. It seems the plan was well planned, by our oppressor. So now let's try to talk about solution. Earlier we talked about homeschooling, and I think that would be a very good idea. But it seems we are suffering from a lack of organization because okay, we talked about Dr. Umar Johnson saying he has difficulties because nobody wants to pay for the school, nobody wants to fund the school. We prefer spending our money into a very fancy phone, just like me, for instance, guilty of charge. We want to spend our money into stupid stuff, but we are not investing our money into ourselves and into our children. So, what will be the plan B then? Since the plan A is money, we don't have much of it. What would be a plan B, according to you?
The plan B is that we have to get back to this community sense of knowledge. Like the Black Panthers set the blueprint. Like you said, there are so many blueprints out there, but the processes that one must take in this country, everything in the US is so much paperwork. So much paperwork, so much paperwork. And if you just can't read, you can't fill out the paperwork. And we know, like you said, the blueprints are in the book. So honestly, we have to make reading sexy. The only thing where we can liberate ourselves is through reading. There's no other way, right? We have seen for at least the past 4 decades, now probably 5 decades, where we have been trying these different methods of achieving liberation. And in every one of them, it's counter to what we need to do because we don't know the history before us. And I saw someone commented a second ago about the reason we are where we are is because we don't know our history. You can't know your history if you can't read. And so if we got those of us that can't read, and then we got those of us that Carter G. Woodson talk about, the ones of us that can read, but what they're doing is just basically bringing the European education right back into the community. So it's a double-edged sword for us unless those of us like me, you, those on this call can really make a difference. But oftentimes those of us like me and you, our position in the movement is not there. We have a higher level role, right? Everybody has a role in liberation, and we just have a higher level role. And so those that got the time and the space and opportunity, that's where our functional illiteracy falls.
You said earlier something very interesting, and I want to be sure everybody heard it. You said that we need to make reading sexy, something like that. Can you say it again? But please say it slowly, but say it again. People need to hear it. Say it again, please.
We need to make reading sexy. We do. We have to read, and phonetically so. And this is back to something I mentioned earlier. We Black Americans are monolingual, and some of those blueprints are not in English. Okay. And so in addition to those, we have to build that bridge stronger between the diaspora for those of us that can read those texts that are not in English, right? And so we got to make reading sexy. We got to we know the knowledge is there. How we do that, it is hard. One reason, because propaganda is really, really effective. And the propaganda will tell you not to read.
Exactly. Thank you for this answer. And this is really something really interesting. We need to make reading sexy. And this is my reaction. Yeah, we need to make it sexy.
You know, I just saw something the other day and I said they are really making gay look really cool to be a Black male and to be gay. Like it's really starting to look really cool, right? Like as a Black woman, I'm starting to see our Black men out here embrace this gay agenda, I feel, and it's starting to look sexy. Like it's almost cool to be a Black male and to be gay. And I'm not saying it in no way to be harsh right now, but what I'm trying to say is that if we can make being Black and gay sexy, we sure the hell can make being Black and reading sexy.
Exactly on point. I totally agree. We have a new panelist in the building, Mr. Sanjaka. Well, hello and welcome.
Hello, Dr. Evandra. Hello, Shango.
Hi.
But I'm sorry I'm living in France. I'm 17, but I'm sorry for my English is not good, but I take my comment on dit courage en anglais?
Courage.
courage pour poser une question. J'ai
Ask a
posé une
question.
question. Ask a question.
At
And
least, my friend, you are doing your best and it's really appreciated. Tu fais de ton mieux et c'est très, très apprécié. So go
merci.
ahead, brother. That's your question.
My question is, what do you think of European education? Et comment on dit contre? C'est versus?
Oui.
Versus.
Django, he can just talk to you in French and you can just translate. I don't mind.
Ok, si tu es plus à l'aise en français, vas-y, je vais essayer de traduire.
Ah, ok. C'est juste pour savoir qu'est-ce qu'elle en pense de l'éducation européenne et contre l'éducation, le panafricanisme, l'africaine, de sa vision américaine.
Ok. Reformule la question pour être sûr que je la traduise correctement.
Qu'est-ce qu'elle en pense de l'éducation européenne
Okay.
contre l'éducation africaine.
Okay.
Le panafricanisme.
Doctor, do you have any knowledge about European education system or education generally speaking? If yes, what do you think about it versus the Pan-Africanism and the Afrocentrism education? What's your take on that?
Well, European education is not to teach you, give you the skills to acknowledge and recognize and overthrow oppression. It wants you to be second class. So it's teaching you to remain in your position. A Pan-African education or an African-centered education is teaching you how to liberate yourself, how to look back to the ancestors, Sankofa, how to understand your history and move us forward today. So those are really the two differences. It's just the philosophy of each, right? Europeans don't want us to recognize that they are the oppressor and the colonizer, so they're not going to teach it to us in that way.
Tu as compris?
Pas trop, non.
En fait, elle dit que, tu sais, ce sont des systèmes totalement différents, que le système européen n'est pas fait pour nous. En fait, il est là pour éduquer les enfants européens à devenir des Européens accomplis. Nous, il se trouve qu'on est juste, on est là, mais c'est pas pour nous. Alors que nous, le panafricanisme et l'éducation à l'africaine, même si on n'est pas en Afrique, même si on fait partie de la diaspora, ça devrait être notre curriculum.
Ah, ok. Because in France, we're learning in school the European bring civilization of the other people in the world, the Native Americans, Africans, and Aborigines in Australia. Is this fakes?
I think what I'm understanding in my answer would be is that history is being told from a Western perspective in general, a European perspective. And so as long as history is continued to begin in Europe, then you will continue to have this European sense of an education. It's just that it erases everyone else's identity because history began in Europe. Right? They don't even want to acknowledge that Africans built the pyramids, and how many decades, how many centuries, how many millenniums has it been? And they still won't recognize history, right? They still won't recognize that mankind began in Africa. They will lead you to believe in America, particularly that Black folk became relevant during slavery. But before slavery, we were nowhere. We just sort of landed on Africa the first day, and then the second day, the colonizers just drove us away. Like they don't even, and that's with all indigenous folk, right? That's with all other that are non-Europeans. And so while it's not there to teach us how to recognize oppression and to liberate ourselves, it's also told from their perspective of what history looks like.
I have a question because we said earlier that homeschooling will be one of the alternative for Black kids. And
well, Shingo, it depends because it's who is educating them. Remember what Carter G. Woodson say.
Exactly.
Assume that just creating a homeschool is going to resolve our problem if our children are still being taught European education. So we need homeschooling. We need it African-centered. And the only way to get that is people who live an African-centered life would need to be the educators as homeschooling. So it's part of the problem, right? But we need not to continue European education in our homeschool spaces.
True. Do you have any people in mind that would be a good fit to be let's say, a starter or trigger to build those homeschool across the country? At least start somewhere and then be the trigger to build others.
I mean, it's just the African way, there's so many of us, but like we talked about before, it might not be so many of us in every state. We have 50 states here, where there's 50 countries on the continent, or maybe a little bit more, right? If you only have one or two in each space, like that's so difficult to make an impact, right? Like if I have the time right now in my life to start a homeschool, and I would be great for it. But the thing about it is, I would only be reaching maybe 1% or less of Black children, right? And we would need to have someone like all of us here today in every space that Black people are, so that we could do this. Otherwise, we're talking about not even hitting a generation of children effectively. We're not going to get, the numbers are just not there. True. So we've got to find a way to where we can take this moment, this pandemic, and how technology has become a resource, and find ways now that someone like me could educate kids across the globe.
Exactly. Right? With the internet could be a good solution, right?
Yes, we've got to use technology to our benefit. So homeschooling is great for like a Band-Aid solution, but for an actual solution, we need to go global with our education. Everywhere there is someone like me that could get on screen at least an hour a day and teach content to children all over this globe. And that is what I think something would be for us to move forward. And this is actually interesting. I just learned this week that coltan, the mineral or whatever that's used in all of technology, that the Congo has the world supply.
Exactly.
So if the Congo has a world supply of the one material that we need to educate one another globally, that's just a problem for me, because we know who is in control of that coltan. It ain't us. And so we have that type of problem, right? We have everything you need to even make a global technology world, and it's being controlled. So we've got to find a way to do this globally now. Like, we have to. There is no way I couldn't sit with kids across this diaspora every day for an hour. I got the ability to do it. The problem is that we don't have technology everywhere. The infrastructure is not everywhere so that we could be global. That's part of the plan. But yet Africa has every resource and material that we need to be global.
So I'll try to be part of the solution and try to make reading sexy, guys. So I encourage you to purchase this fantastic book, The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson. You will find the links in the description box below. So we have a new guest in the building.
Can we just acknowledge the guest? There were some comments, and I wanted to comment with the comments that was there, because it is very beautiful to see an African speak French. And you're 17 years old, and you sounded absolutely phenomenal. And you have a skill that hardly no Black American has. You can shoot out English, and I can understand. You can speak French, and it is something that is a gift to you. It is something that the ancestors have allowed you to have, and it is something that is valued. You know, if I had you on my team, you speak French and English, like, and where you can't speak English, I got you, but I can't speak French at all. So, like, I want you to know this day and for the rest of your life, you own however broken that English is, and you look good as an African speaking French. So just say that.
T'entends ça, Sanjaka?
Comment?
Tu vois, elle vient de te dire qu'en fait, tu as un avantage, et elle te remercie déjà de faire l'effort de parler l'anglais, même si ton anglais n'est pas parfait, c'est pas le but. Mais le fait que tu fasses un effort, tu as un gros avantage par rapport à la plupart des Américains, parce que la plupart des Américains ne parlent que l'anglais. Alors que toi, tu parles le français, mais tu parles aussi un peu l'anglais suffisamment. Elle t'a compris quand tu as parlé. Donc, tu vois, tu as un avantage par rapport aux autres. Donc, c'est la raison pour laquelle I'm going to switch to English to be sure.
Thank you.
That's the reason why I keep telling you guys, this is why my contents in my channel will be more and more in English. You have no excuse. You went to school, you went to university, you're supposed to be able to speak basic English. So guys, I don't want to hear any excuses. We need to connect to build the bridges between the English-speaking and the French-speaking community. If you pretend to be Pan-African, don't pretend, be Pan-African. be a Pan-Africanist. You need to build bridges between the two communities, and we cannot use language as a barrier. All right?
No, we can't.
Never.
I need somebody that can speak French. And you 17 years old, man, listen, we could do a lot together.
Tu vois, Sanjaka, tu as un avantage, tu es jeune, tu as de l'énergie et tu fais des efforts pour parler anglais. C'est un avantage. We have a new guest in the building, Mr. Nkosi. What's up, brother?
Good, good. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Yes.
Hello, Shango. Hello, Sanjaka. Hello, Dr. Evandra Catherine. One of my favorites. I follow you for years, and I know you're a beast. But I do have a question, Dr. Evandra. For our kids, let's say kids who are 5 years old, they're just going to elementary school, they're starting. What type of materials we can teach them from the beginning?
You know, I love your question because all of the work I do is from birth to 8. And so I am here for that question. And so, you know, interestingly is that we have found out through research that children as young as 3 years old are already aware of racism against them, towards them, right? They're already very cognitively aware of racism by the age of 3. So when you ask age 5, we need to go back to age 3, preschool, where most kids in America begin school at. Recently, they just put out a statistic that there are still today more children's books with animals than children of color. When I say, I'm talking about Black, Latino, Asian, etc. There are, and all of us grouped together, there are still more animals in children's books than people of color. So your question that you asked, it's all about the materials that we're giving them. But by the time they're age 3, right? Our children aren't even seeing themselves represented in books. And so I said, making reading sexy, but why are you going to pick up a book full of white people? It's not sexy. But if you see a front cover of a girl with an afro, you're more inclined to pick it up. Regardless if you're going to read it, you're more inclined to grab that piece of knowledge, right? It's representation for our little children. As if we as parents continue to give our Black children white dolls, that's not helping them form a healthy racial identity. Okay? We have to stop giving children dolls. I know you remember the study maybe back in the 1980s where they did a study of Black kids and showed them dolls and asked them which doll was prettier, the white doll or the Black doll. The white doll was seen as prettier. And so what we need to give our young children is representation. They need to see themselves in books. They need to see themselves in the things that they're playing with. They need to see themselves on the pictures on the wall. You know, we don't even buy Black art. Most Black people, they'll just go and just get whatever picture from the grocery store, the Target or the Ross or whatever, right? But it's not representative of us as Black people. And for younger children, it's what's hanging on the walls, right? Even when they walk in the classroom, they're not hanging on the wall. So in a just very elementary way of answering your question, it's us as parents just giving them something that they want to be interested in, which is a book with them in it, a doll baby that looks like them. And for the little boys, while there are not many superhero figures that are Black, you just get them 50 Black Panthers at this point. You know, like it's just like we don't give our kids enough to play with as little children. And for all of you that are listening today, play is what developed children. So it's not necessarily how much you read to them and how many educational materials you put in front of them. Children need to explore. They need to play. That is how they learn. And if you constantly give them white dolls to play with, that's how they're going to learn. They're going to learn that you care for white folk. You don't care for Black folk. You read, etc. And so for those younger, earlier years, those first 1,000 days of life, those first 3,000 days of life, it's representation the whole way around. Even Sunday school, it's all white folk in these pamphlets and books that they get, right? Like it's either animals or white people. That's all they get at those younger years. And so we got to find ways to engage them in exploratory play. We got to give them things that represent them and really look at the toys that we give them to play with. And then the roles. that we're teaching them with those toys, you know, buying a kitchen and teaching the girls that your role is in the kitchen, you know, getting trucks and balls. You're a boy, your role is over here. And we're not even using those moments to teach how to interact with one another and even in a home, in a relationship space. And that takes us on a different lane, different valley when we get into that, right? But we've got to find ways that we are giving our children to develop. They develop through play and through toys. So I'm sorry that was drawn out, but
oh no.
No, that was good. That was good.
That was good. A lot of passion, a lot of energy. This is exactly what we like in this show, in this African Chronicle. Let's have a quick break. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the African Chronicles. This is the show called the Book of the Day number 4 with our guest, Dr. Evandra Catherine, who is on fire today. Guys, if you just joined us, you missed something very good. So I urge you to watch the replay. And again, don't forget to like and to subscribe, or I'm going to say that you're a hater. You don't work for the cause. Are you?
Shango.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, Dr. Evandra, what you said was well said, and if I understood, representation said a lot. So the way even we dress, the way we do our hair, even in our house, what we got on the walls, things like that. That's help our kids to live or to stay in the African environment already in the house.
Mm-hmm. And the reason why that's so important, because it's a buffer to when they arrive in these spaces that they're not represented in. It's a buffer to that, right? If you are only just given white representation and then you enter into a space where you're constantly told that you're below me, you don't have no foundation that you're not, right? You don't have meaning. And so given these early years, particularly these early years, it's really about representation because it serves as a buffer to racism in the classroom. It helps them have a strong racial identity. And as you may know, since you brought up 5 years old, the brain is nearly fully developed by the time you're 3 to 5 years old. And so if you have a strong racial identity at 3 to 5, the research shows you're going to have a strong racial identity as an adult because that's already in the forming of your brain. It's just brain science, neuroscience. If you don't have that buffer or that foundation, then you cannot have a strong racial identity. And the problem with our children is not that they're not African. They don't have a racial identity because all they've been shown is whiteness. They've never been shown blackness. And so if you can form a strong, healthy racial identity, it has good cognitive effects, good physical effects, good mental effects, and good educational effects. And it's all just simple racial identity.
Yes, that's well said, And I do have another question. I stay in the US like you, and now what I'm seeing in school materials, they're implementing gender. And I just want to have your take on it. Is people like you, like a doctor, you have a PhD. Are you guys are fighting it, or if you fight it, you're in trouble? I mean, what's going on? Or what's your take on it? Our kids are only 5, 10, and they're talking about gender. Though you are not a boy, you're a girl. They're confusing them.
So we live in a nation of Europeans, and in their way of life, homosexuality has always been a part of their way of life, right? The more African, I'm not saying that there are not homosexual Africans, right? But it wasn't something that was an acceptable way of life. Like, we didn't make it something openly acceptable in the broader scheme of things. But since Europeans have openly accepted homosexuality, they are introducing it right back to their generations to come, right? This is a strictly a European thing. And so to fight it would be to be wrong. You can't fight the gender argument no more. They have inflated it with feminism now. They done put it in with transgenderism now. Now it's just gender. They want our kids to believe that it doesn't matter what body parts you have. You can be who you want. And that's just not an African way of life. And all groups of people have a way of life, a sense of self. And just the further we get away from being African, the more accepting we are of gender. And in the United States, we want to call ourselves post-racial. And so the next oppression would be gender. And so they want to move past the black and white fight and now make all the efforts focused on gender, which started with men and women, but now we know it is expanded beyond that. So what I would say is that our kids are not safe in America when it comes to the homosexuality or gay agenda anymore. It is just part of the way of life of Europeans, and this country is a European nation. I don't know what it's like globally, if there's a very strong agenda to push these things in school and on television and through toys. And if it is happening globally, it's probably coming from the same colonizers and oppressors' way of life. I don't recall this in my studies of African American studies. I don't recall anywhere where we had these very, not even just homosexuality, but also our relationships with animals. I don't want to get into that. It's controversial, but Europeans have naturally had close relationships with animals, close, so homosexuality was within their culture. That was just their way of life. If they didn't come into our way of life, it wouldn't be a problem for us, right? But they have brought their way of life into our way of life. And we are race first people. So if I, as a black person, haven't received a right, that's what I'm fighting for. But the Europeans now want us to be gender people. Let's just fight for gender rights. That's not the same thing as fighting for racial rights. Like, I'm black first, then I'm a woman. And I'll use an example real quick, pay equity. People say, we all know that white folk are paid higher than black folk. And then you have within black folk, you have black men paid higher than black women. So then when we're just looking at black folk, black women want to say that I'm a woman and I should be paid equal to or more than a man, right? But what we're not saying is that black folk in general, regardless of gender, are paid less than white folk. We rather fight for women pay as a fighting for black pay. And that is why the gender and race thing needs to be distinguished. And that's a really great example to use it in, because we need to stop as black women fighting to get more money than white men or white women and fight for black people to make the same amount of money regardless of gender as white people. And so we need to remain race first and not allow ourselves to start advocating from a gender perspective. I'm a black woman, and most black women, or many that I see, are advocating for women's rights. They're no longer advocating for African rights or black rights. And that's just not going to get us anywhere. And I hate to sound like I'm transphobic or homophobic or all of those things, but I'm race first. I'm a Pan-Africanist. And until black folk in general are doing better, I can't concern about the disparities between you as a black woman and me as a black man. I just can't. You know, my husband just went up for a job interview. He didn't get the job interview. A black woman got the job over him. And that in America is where we are. They will give the black woman something before they give the black man something in that instance, right? They told my husband that he stood out of all the candidates. That's what they told him his feedback was. And the reason they didn't give it to him, they told him it was tenure, but they gave it to a Black woman. That's not good for Black. I'm a Black man. You gave a Black woman a position that I was more than qualified for, right? And so what we find is that the white people consistently divide us now along gender lines, and they will continue to do this. I hate to keep talking, but I want to bring up another example. In Virginia got its first Black lieutenant governor about 4 years ago in the last election, and 25 years ago, it got its first Black governor. So the Black lieutenant governor who's in office right now, currently in Virginia, he's running for governor now of Virginia, the proper succession. Guess who he's being challenged by?
A woman.
2 Black women. So what I'm trying, it bothers me because he's the first Black lieutenant governor, and you won't even allow this man to become the second Black governor for you wanting to be a Black woman, and you're gonna come and run against him. Why? Right? And so we allow gender to get in the way of our race. If we are already making a stride in a space as the Black race, why are you going to make it harder for the Black voters? Now they got to pick between a Black woman and a Black man. They're going to split the vote, and the white man's going to get the election. Exactly. It ain't that pocket of us. So anytime we get split, we've already gave those candidates no chance of winning. Why are we as Black women doing that? And I'm sure there are instances that go the opposite way with Black men, etc. But it makes no sense for the first Black lieutenant governor to be challenged by 2 Black women to be the governor. Why? Mm-hmm. We've allowed to make us think that gender is our fight. He was a man lieutenant governor. The first Black governor was a man Black. So as a woman, I need to come and do the women thing, right? No, be happy for the Black race. Mm-hmm. What you doing? You don't challenge your brother in a space where it ain't but 13% of the vote anyway. So anyways, to answer your gender question, it's not the African way of life. That is what I've known to be case from the books. If there's some other books out there that tells me that there's the African way of life, I'm willing to read them. But homosexuality is just not the African way of life. It just wasn't. Homosexuality, if you want to think about it, may have been occurring in the sense of like polygamy, polyamory, and those kind of things, right? Because you do have like maybe women that might be together or something, whatever. Like, but you don't see it in that way, right? This just blatant disregard for family structure is why homophobia is bad. It's just disrupting the family structure. And that's why it's not the African way of life.
I think it's a part of the plan. I mean, you remember Chancellor Williams talk about the destruction of the Black civilization. First of all, divide and conquer, and then destroy the economy and the community, then send them to war, hoping they're all going to die during war, and then brainwash their mind because they want us to spend their money into our business, and then kill the Black family with the feminism and all that. I'm a strong Black woman. I don't need no man.
I'm not a strong Black woman, okay? I'm a damsel in distress all the time. All the time. I just can't understand how women out here live by this phrase of F dudes get money. I'm just going to say it in the most best way without cussing. But most Black women now are like, F the man, I want the money. That's a European capitalistic individual way of life. We don't even respect the man even just for being him. Like if you can't pay for the cookies, you can't even talk to me and say hello. But like it's real talk right now. Honestly, these women are not willing to give you no conversation unless you paying for the cookie. And then outside of that, they would much rather have your sperm than to have your love. Right? Women now want to have children, not get married. But yet, if you ask a woman, a white woman, how come you don't have no kids yet? The first thing she say out of her mouth is, I'm not married. It's a real true thing. It's a different way of thinking, right? A white woman will immediately bring up the fact that she's not married as a first response to that. Whereas a black woman, she ain't even thinking about the marriage. She wants the money and the sperm. And guess what? The sperm gets me extra money. Indeed. Child support, WIC, TANF, social services, free public housing. So while the it's a lot of problems, right? It's a lot. I don't even want to take us into another show. I think part 2 of the show could be that, and we're over 2 hours, and it's been a long time. But honestly, it is really where we are right now, even as women. It's strong women, independent women. You don't need no man. You don't need him to raise your child. You can have kids by yourself. I'm not of that way of life.
And all of this is the result of the miseducation. We don't have the education. We don't have the knowledge. We don't have anything, any proper parental guidance, nothing. That's the reason why, my friends, I'm going to do my part of the burden. I'm going to try to make reading sexy. So please, guys, I urge you to buy this book, The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson, and read. It's very important because the reading will give you all the knowledge, the tools in order to set up a plan, in order to liberate ourselves. It's been 2 hours. I don't want to abuse your time, my dear friend Catherine. Go ahead. Say something. Go ahead.
You real quick on the purchase of the book. I'm just going to share that I don't think that the Woodson family is getting any royalties from that book if you purchase it. So no. So if you can find it electronically or whatever, do so. But just even having to purchase the book, who do you think those monies are going to go to? There's no black publishing company that's publishing Carter G. Woodson's book now, right? I'm not saying don't buy it, but if you can find it for free somewhere, but his family ain't getting no royalties off that purchase.
Damn.
So we have to be even careful today. Like Marcus Garvey never wrote a book. Okay. Marcus Garvey himself has never written a book. There are plenty of people out here making money as if what they're writing was written or said by Marcus Garvey, which it may have been, but he's never wrote a book, people, just like he's never been to the continent. So we have to be aware that even the knowledge that we need to liberate ourselves, we are paying white people for that knowledge. So buy the book if you can get it from a black person that might be selling it. They had it. If you can, try to find it electronically. Or if you got to pay a white publishing company for the book, pay the white publishing company.
Thank you very much for those precision, because I was absolutely certain that they were having royalties. But thank you for this information. I will let my dear friend...
The Pan-African flag, by the way. That's why the red, black, and green flag, the UNIA doesn't have no control over it because it's public domain. There is nobody from the Garvey's legacy that is getting any sort of royalties from that flag. And we use it, and so many people use it. Biden used it in his election. T-Mobile just used it in their Black History campaign. We are not getting royalties. We have to understand that when we are out here trying to do these things to get this knowledge. Like, it's public domain. The patent office was created to steal the black man's inventions, informations, and intellectual knowledge. And so many of these things, the black man did not have the right to copyright. The black man didn't have a right to publish. So therefore, the black man doesn't get no royalties. Just like all these artists out here that don't have the rights to their masters, and some white Jewish man owns them in the music industry. So we don't have the rights to a lot of things that is ours, that we don't get paid for that. We don't get no royalty from that. I'm over the show. I'm a mute.
No problem. Go ahead, and Cozy, your last question. Go ahead, Cozy.
Okay, I know it's been 2 hours. We're going to the end. Dr. Evandra, you mentioned Marcus Garvey. I just want to have your take on it real quick. I don't know if you heard it. Maybe you heard it. There's a movie coming out maybe next year. So what's your take on it?
It's no difference in Ma Rainey's Bottom, right? You got people reenacting our history and trying to put it on the screen. While it may be false, while some of it may be true, it's still knowledge that black people didn't even know about. It's going to be plenty of people that's never even heard of Marcus Garvey. But because the movie come out, they now know the name, right? I never heard of Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. They got a movie that's coming out Friday called The Concrete Cowboy. It's talking about black cowboys and the Buffalo Soldiers. So what I say to this is that even the movie The Banker just came out, and The Banker tells us how black folks were able to own a bank and buy property at a time. What I say to your question is that I don't care. They can put out as many as they want because it will at least bring awareness to that history that we don't know. It may not be true. It may be false. It may be based on real events, but the thinking person will do their due to go and look further into that history to maybe fact check some of what they saw. But like if I had never seen the movie The Banker, I would have never knew of those black men who were able to buy up banks and property where it was all white. Right? So to answer your question, we need as many movies and documentaries about black history that's never been told as possible. We've gotten the Miami movie, the One Night in Miami movie recently. People didn't know about that legacy and history. These movies gotta keep coming out. While they may not be told by us or by us, it's giving us something. So keep producing them is what I would say.
Thank you
for your answer. Sanjaka, another question? Go ahead.
Oui, j'avais juste une dernière question. C'est juste pour avoir un conseil, comment avoir un conseil d'elle pour comment quand on fait quand on commence son panafricanisme, en gros, comment on fait pour rester quand même équilibré mentalement, pour pas sombrer dans la haine et tout ça.
Alors moi, je vais te donner un élément de réponse et ensuite je vais traduire pour elle. I'm going to answer him first and then I will translate for you. Tu sais, un bon moyen pour justement combattre ce que tu dis, mon cher ami, on l'a dit, c'est la lecture. Il y a tellement d'écrits concernant notre culture, tu n'auras même pas le temps, tu n'auras pas le temps. De toute façon, tu auras à un moment donné ce sentiment de colère et de frustration parce que tu vas découvrir beaucoup de choses qui t'ont été cachées. Et c'est normal, c'est normal. On est tous passés par là, tous. Mais tu seras tellement occupé à t'instruire, à lire, à chercher et à partager ce que tu as appris avec les autres, tu n'auras pas le temps d'haïr. Tu vas utiliser ton énergie à partager l'information pour, comme dans le film Matrix, à réveiller les autres. Donc, tu n'auras pas le temps d'haïr les autres. Franchement, je te dis, on est tous passés par là. Now, back to the question for our guest, Doctor. Sanjaka was asking, do you have any advice to avoid falling into, when you are in this journey of Pan-Africanism and the quest of knowledge, do you have any advice not to fall into the trap of hate and will of revenge and all that? I was saying, and I will let you speak then, I was saying to the young brother that when you are into that path of knowledge and reading books, that's why we keep saying it's sexy, you don't have time to be, you will be angry at first because you are finding the truth. The truth is being hidden to you your entire life. But the more you read, the more you learn, the more you share the knowledge, you won't have time to hate people because you need to share the knowledge with others. That was my take. So I'll let you answer.
I got to unmute. I'm sorry. I just want to mention the quote by James Baldwin. You know which one I'm talking about?
Yep.
So that would answer your question. And basically, James Baldwin said to be black is to be in a constant state of rage, in a sense. And so in this quest, you will always be angry. But that anger, what I use it as I just tell myself, that's the ancestors in me that wants me to be awakened to what I'm seeing. And so I use anger, and I get a lot of anxiety, which a lot of black people have anxiety from racial trauma. So I have a lot of anxiety. And I just constantly tell myself that those feelings that I feel is just the ancestors inside of me, because I know that this body is a physical being, right? It's a vessel, and there are spirits within me. And so if something is angry in me or anxious in me, that's just one of the ancestors. And I need to use that and fuel myself to do what's necessary. And then there was a great point. If you're reading, you don't got time to get angry. You just got time to weaponize yourself against the European. And so I would just basically keep it at James Baldwin. If you can print it out, put it on your wall or put it in your soul. But what you feel is a natural feeling, and don't feel threatened by your anger. And those around you shouldn't feel threatened by that anger. That is the ancestors in you telling you that what you are experiencing is not natural at all. And for all of you who get angry and anxious and just overwhelmed with whiteness, you are not supposed to feel it naturally. And so that is the ancestors in you telling you to resist whatever it is that it may be.
Thank you very much, Dr. Evandra Catherine. That was a hell of a show. I should have invited you earlier. So I guess I'm going to have to invite you again.
Well, you did invite me earlier, but I actually didn't have the time. So that was my fault. I'm sorry. And I'm actually, as the year has been going on, I've been actually getting busier and busier. So it's even harder now. But you did invite me earlier for sure.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. But you will come back again as soon as you can. That was a real pleasure. Guys, that was a real pleasure to have you on board. Nkosi, Sanjata, all the people watching us during this live show. That was really interesting. Now, again and again and again, let me introduce you to the book again. Let me show you The Miseducation of the Negro. I urge you to buy this book, to read it, or to find it.
I have this book.
You can. Excuse me?
I have this book.
Excellent.
I have
So you read it and share it all around you, because this is very important, because you will see back in the days 1933, and that was then, and now 2021, not a lot have changed. So it takes a lot of work from us to make a change. So thank you again, Dr. Evandra Catherine, for being here. It's been 2 hours. I don't want to abuse your time. I know you're very busy. A last word for Nkosi, a last word for Sanjata, and we'll wrap it up.
No, it's not a question. For those who understand English, subscribe to Dr. Evandra Catherine channel. Subscribe. She has good materials over there. She talks about good topics, great topics. If you understand English, subscribe to her channel.
Exactly. Let me show the here in the screen. She has. Oh, by the way, the link from your YouTube channel doesn't work so far, but you can follow Dr. Evandra Catherine on Instagram, and you can follow her on YouTube, but also on Facebook, Dr. Evandra Catherine. Anyway, come back to me if you didn't get the time to write this down.
I'm gonna just share with the crowd. My YouTube, I had to suspend it because I was going up for a promotion with the white folk. So I will unsuspend my YouTube, but you guys know that can prevent me in my other areas. And so I had to hide some of my content for a short period of time, but I got the job. So thank you for reminding me. I need to make my YouTube channel back live again. So I'll be doing that this week.
No problem. Anyway, we're going to follow you. So guys, if you didn't take note, ask me and I will give you details regarding our social network. Thank you again, guys. Thank you. That was a real pleasure to exchange with you. Thank you again, Dr. Evandra Catherine, for being here, for holding so long. Thank you, Nkosi. Thank you, Sanjaka. Thank you for all of you for following this show. And you know what? Like I used to say, knowledge is best served when it's shared. All right? Read. Getting rich sexy, and it is sexy. We're going to make it sexy. That's one of my goals, and I'm really proud of it. Guys, I wish you a very good afternoon, morning, or night, wherever you are, and I see you next time.